Hi, this is Colin Sandberg from Backbone Performance, and I thought that I would try to post some brief videos with my answers to common questions I get from athletes. While I always encourage athletes to reach out to me if they have questions, there are some questions that come up often enough that I thought it might be worth it to make some videos that can be used as resources to coached and uncoached athletes alike. Promise that I will try my best to keep it brief, so let's get started. So, first question: what do I do if the weather is bad? Answer: well, this depends on what kind of weather we're really talking about and what kind of workout it is that you're supposed to be doing. So, let's start with the type of workout. If you're supposed to be doing a relatively short, meaning less than 2 hour workout, especially if it's a structured interval session, just do it indoors. Every cyclist who's serious about cycling, about their training, should have a good indoor setup and pretty much ready to go. I'd say you should be able to get home and be on your bike starting your ride within 15 minutes. That might take some time initially to get that set up in the way that you want it, in terms of having your trainer, your mat, your skewer, your bottles, your sweat towel, whatever entertainment you're watching, and most importantly, a good, strong fan that's going to simulate an 18 to 20 mile an hour wind in that trainer area. But once you got that set up, you should be ready to get quickly on the trainer, and that should really be true year round, whether it's December or June or July. If it's a longer ride, we're talking about like a 3 or 4 hour endurance ride for the most part. I'd say you want to do these outside. There are some crazy people that say, I don't mind doing 4 hours on the trainer, but I really feel like you gotta dip pretty deep into the motivation well for that, and it's just not worth it. I'd rather you spend your motivation somewhere else. So find a way to ride outside for the most part. That might mean you look at the weather forecast for the rest of the week and you see if you can switch things around, do your long ride when it's nicer, and if so, great, an easy solution. If that's not possible because of your work schedule or your racing schedule or because it's going to be bad weather all week, you want to look for other options. And here's where we need to talk about the specific types of bad weather, because there are certain conditions that are just going to be uncomfortable and other conditions that are downright dangerous. And everyone draws the line somewhere different, but I think in general, my experience is people are a little too conservative with this. And if you have the right bikes, the right clothing, and you're smart about it, you can get outside in the vast majority of weather conditions. The key, though, is that you want it to be a beneficial workout. You don't want to just be getting outside for the sake of getting outside. Otherwise, you'd rather be doing nothing at all. If it's really cold, you can ride the mountain bike or the cross bike instead of the road bike, which will slow you down and therefore you don't get as much wind chill, which is the main reason you get cold when you're riding outside in the wintertime. It's not the temperature, it's the wind chill. And if you don't have a mountain bike or cross bike, do some stuff to your road bike that will slow it down, like putting fenders on your bike or using thick tubes or wider tires or a heavier bike. A lot of people have a winter bike that they use, and it doesn't get that way. The race bike doesn't get as beat up, and it's heavier. It slows you down. You're not getting as much wind chill. And be smart about where you ride, where you plan your routes. Try to avoid any long descents that will really make things tough. So try to stick to the flatter roads if you can. Although there you also want to try to stay away from big open fields if possible. Here in Philadelphia, we have the Schuylkill River Trail. A lot of people ride that in the winter, nice and flat, but it runs right along the river, and you get that cold air whipping across the river. It can be really frigid. Wearing the right clothes is a huge, huge topic, and I've written about this before in my blog. I even made a spreadsheet with recommendations for different temperatures and different conditions, so I'll post the link to that in this video at the bottom. Although I will say I put that together a few years ago, and one thing I didn't have in there was bar mitts. I think that's something can be a really good solution. A lot of people say, "Oh, I'm fine riding in the winter, but my hands I can't keep my hands warm," and this is a really good way to deal with that. can get really comfortable in some very cold temperatures. And the nice thing about those is you can just wear light gloves and pop your hands out of the bar mitts when you want, and if your hands are overheating. Bottom line, I think if you're wearing the right clothes and you're being smart, you can get outside and be comfortable down to at least 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, of course, if it's below freezing, you want to be thoughtful about your bottles freezing. There's a few tricks there, like you can put one bottle in your back pocket to start the ride and then switch them out halfway through or something. Some people put their bottles upside down, can help. And yes, some people will put a little bit of whiskey or bourbon or something in their bottle. A little bit will help lower the freezing point, so it's not not quite freezing so fast. But a little bit is the key there. If it's raining outside, fenders can be really helpful in terms of keeping the water off your feet and your body. But you also want to make some different clothing choices. If it's absolutely pouring rain, you probably might be in the territory there of the ride just not having much training value, and at worst being dangerous if cars can't see you. But if we're talking a little bit of drizzle, I think pair of fenders and proper clothing should be okay. Maybe you want to bring an extra pair of gloves, an extra pair of socks in your back pocket, switch them out halfway through the ride. And again, those bar mitts can be really useful in the rain too. If it's extremely windy, you also want to be thoughtful about the route you take. And if possible, I'm kind of the opinion that better to spend most of the time in the crosswind, so you're not going like 10 miles an hour at 300 watts for one part and then 30 miles an hour at 100 watts for the rest of the ride. The thing to consider with the wind is that it's going to make it feel a lot colder too. So you want to dress for what it feels like, not necessarily the actual temperature. On the other end of the spectrum, you have extreme heat. And here's another place where you really want to be looking at the weather forecast ahead of time and planning accordingly. You have to race in the heat, so you want to try and acclimate, and it takes your body about 2 weeks of riding in the heat to really fully acclimate. At the same time, if you say, okay, I'm just going to go out there in the hottest part of the day and get myself acclimated, you're probably in at the very least for a really poor quality workout. Your power is going to be down, your heart rate's going to be up, and you're just going to feel miserable. And at worst case, you can literally make yourself sick. You can severely dehydrate yourself. You can put yourself at risk for heat stroke, stuff like that. Really dangerous territory, and you can put yourself out of commission for a while. So what I would suggest is that try to spend a little bit of time in the hotter parts of the day, but really think about the quality of the workout, and spend the bulk of the time when it's a little bit cooler, if you can choose when you're riding. Which I recognize not everybody can do, but I've got a few friends in Tucson, Arizona, where a lot of the year it's up in the 90s by 10 a.m. So they'll start their rides at 5 a.m. They get a few hours in, and it's reasonable temperatures, and then maybe the last hour it's pretty hot. So they're getting that acclimation benefit without sacrificing the whole workout. In terms of hydration, normal guideline is to drink 20 to 40 ounces of fluid per hour, but if it's 90 degrees or above, you might need to close to double that. And in addition to that, you probably want to be taking in some extra electrolytes like Nuun tablets, both on and off the bike. Also, you want to be thoughtful about the routes you choose and make sure that you plan for more stops, places you can fill up your bottles. You don't want to be out in the middle of nowhere and then looking for somebody's garden hose. I've been there before. Another thing to make sure you're hydrating adequately is when it's really hot, weigh yourself before and after the ride. And the rule of thumb is for every pound you lose, you want to be drinking 24 ounces of fluid within probably a few hours after you finish that ride. And then this is also somewhere where, like in the wintertime when it's really cold, you might want to get on the mountain bike and get in the woods where there's shade and it's a little bit cooler because of the tree cover. Sometimes you need to deal with increased humidity, so you got to deal with that. But again, if it's extremely hot, like we're talking over 95 degrees Fahrenheit, you might want to consider just riding indoors, especially if you have a shorter, higher intensity workout. A lot of times, your workout quality would just be better indoors anyway. So be smart about this. Toughness goes a long way in racing. It's generally rewarded, but in training, a lot of times it's really just not risk. The risk is not worth the reward. Um, and that's really the case with a lot of this. Whether we're talking about extreme cold, extreme heat, extreme rain, extreme wind, lightning or hailstorms, or the one thing we didn't mention is air pollution, something a lot of people don't consider when they're looking ahead at the forecast. But a big issue in urban areas and in a lot of agricultural areas, especially at certain types of the year. So something to pay attention to, and just be smart. But being a tough guy with all your training is kind of like playing Russian roulette. Just not worth it, because eventually there's going to be a bullet in that chamber. So, of course, for the coached athletes out there, give your coach a call if you're not sure what to do. And remember, the sooner they know about the problem, the more options that are on the table. All right, hopefully that wasn't too long. If you have any questions you'd like me to answer, write them in the comments here or email me at colin@backboneperformance.com. Happy riding.